new nonprofit. We started about 2019. Most of our work is under civic engagement, nonviolence, and just helping people that are in marginalized communities. I'm here to represent WIC, Wyoming in Independent Citizens Coalition, but I also have some consulting work with Better Wyoming that does health initiatives. And so that side of it does civic engagement too, but primarily tonight is on Wyoming Independent Citizens Coalition. Thank you for inviting me. Antonio.
Right on. My name is Antonio Serrano. I'm the chairman and co-founder of JUNTOS. We work to fight discrimination, fight any policy that's hateful that could affect immigrants, Latinos, and people of color. We do know your rights trainings for immigrant folks, legal clinics, and we also work to keep our community clean with cleanup events in Cheyenne and Casper. So we're trying to do it all to be part of the community. That's us.
Hi, I'm Rachel Martinez, and my day job is with the Wyoming Civic Engagement Network as the director. It's a new initiative that we launched last year to work with partner organizations across the state, nonprofits, to increase voter turnout in Wyoming. So that's my day job. My other role, my other day job is to be a wife, a mom to 3 adult amazing kids, and to be a grandma to a 4-year-old and a new grandson who's 2 weeks old. So I stay busy and I volunteer a lot in the community. My other hat tonight is I am president of the Hispanic Organization for Progress in Education here in Cheyenne. And we focus on education of youth and mentorship and scholarships. And then I've been on the board of the Wyoming Latino Youth Conference, and that takes place every year at the University of Wyoming for 5th through 12th grade young females who are learning how to make a difference. So I'm just happy to be here. Thank you to ESPC, who is just really a pillar also for civic engagement, and just honored to be asked to be on this panel. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. So thanks for everybody that does everything. We all wear many hats. So let's start with the first question. So with what is everybody's definition of civic engagement? What does it mean, and what are the potential outcomes? And we can start with Carla.
I'll start with what it means. I believe that civic engagement is increasing civic participation at the ballot box and increasing voter registration, especially with marginalized populations. It's community organizing, beginning with grassroots engagement. And civic engagement is also social and political, that influences multi-levels of policy and representation. Civic engagement must have minority people and leaders who have relational pathways. They need to see us, they need to look like us in order for us to get our word and our message out, and in order for us, our community to support us. So in short, I believe the power of organizing, especially in minority communities in Wyoming, is about relationships. And then on B, let's see, what are the potential outcomes? Hopefully, and this is kind of like Wyson, in 10 years, I hope the skin pigmentation of the legislators reflect the minority and our gender, our women in those positions. So hopefully in 10 years, they'll look a little different. Thank you.
Thank you. And Antonio, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I agree with everything Carla said. I'll probably say that a few times. But I'll also add that it's the gente, the people recognizing the power that they have over elected officials and taking ownership of that power. It's people feeling energized and empowered to register and to vote, to do both. It's people feeling and being able to see that their vote and their voice matters. It's more than just like the step by step. It's how you feel too, for me.
Yeah, and for me, absolutely, it's a simple yet complex question, right? And we all have a little bit of a different answer, but I think the bottom line is absolutely just improving our community and improving the society in which we live, getting involved. And as Carla mentioned, sometimes that's associated with a political outcome, but it doesn't have to be. And so it can be volunteering, advocating, just general activism. That peer-to-peer pressure is civic engagement, right? What I like to say is that anything that you can take from a transaction to a transformation with meeting people where they're at, that's being civically engaged. It's broad enough to encompass many things, but we can also target it down. And I think we'll hear a little bit about that tonight. But when we turn people out to vote, we can see that change happens. And I think that's an outcome that I'd like to see more.
I agree. So that was really great answers. I feel empowered. So the next question, why is civic engagement especially important for traditionally underrepresented and marginalized communities like our own? So Carla, you want to answer that first? Carla, I think you're muted, so sorry.
Okay. I believe that we're excluded from the political process and the decision making and have limited representation if we don't have people from our communities in the legislation or even social political power. And some of the decisions that are made for us are unjust. And so, like Antonio said, we need to step up and start saying this is not okay, and then getting involved in that civic and social political process.
Thank you. Antonio?
I think civic engagement is especially important for underrepresented communities because, well, I always hear people say things like politics are too much. It doesn't affect me. And well, to be straight up, you might not care about politics, but politics care a lot about you. And they're doing crap every single day that impacts you and impacts every single person that calls Wyoming home. And I wish me just saying that sentence was enough to motivate people to vote, but honestly, it's not. So one of my goals and Junto's goals is to remind the gente that we're part of Wyoming too, that this is our home too, and that we deserve to have a say in how this state runs because we help keep it running.
Period. All right. And Rachel, your turn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the Latino, Hispanic culture, however you identify, we're very social people, and many underrepresented populations, whether it be minority groups, people with disabilities, groups that just aren't the majority, right? We find solitude and camaraderie with each other and others that look like us and have the same kind of lived experience. So we tend to stick together. We're definitely not a monolith, right? We all, as Antonio mentioned, we have different views, and we're here in Wyoming. We've been here in Wyoming since its beginning, and so I think it's just important. Civic engagement for these groups is organizing around those shared values, the culture. It's comforting. It's energizing to know that you're just not alone. I know walking sometimes in a room and being the only one that looks like myself, it can be intimidating. It can also be exhausting. And so really taking the time, I think, with civic engagement to understand the history, not just the surface of these communities, but really just meeting these underrepresented communities where they're at. And if you are part of the majority group, it's important to be open to learning and understanding the norms of the underrepresented and marginalized communities, so we can all step in and help each other while not coming in and taking over. And I think just for us too, as different groups, involved in different things in the community, we also need to come together and try to understand and work more towards those common goals. I always say this, in politics, we probably have more in common than we don't. We just don't ever highlight that because it's easier to concentrate on the things we don't have in common. So civic engagement is really important to focus on those things that we can get done collectively.
Thank you. The other conversation piece that we had was how would increased civic engagement benefit the overall and well-being and representation of the Hispanic and Latino communities in Wyoming? What do you think that would be? Carla?
I was thinking about this question, and I think with our work with WIC and with Wyson, there's been several examples, and I thought maybe I could just give the community some examples and they can think about it. What we've done in the Hispanic community is redistricting. We talked a lot about redistricting in a large population in Cheyenne. We fought for that. It didn't go very well, but we'll continue to make the point that if there is 14, 20 to 22% of Hispanics in a community, we should have representation. So we'll continue to work on that. So redistricting will be probably an issue that will help the overall well-being of the Latino community. The other things we've done is, like Antonio mentioned, is voter assistant registration. And you don't have to have the county clerks to do that. We've done it at the library several Saturdays and Sundays, and just helped with the assistant part. We have also, you can think about doing high school voter registration. That was a success with the community's help. Of our 3 high schools and our alternative school, we registered over 150 kids last April. They were very excited about that. So that's something that I think will increase our overall benefit in the future. And those kids they were fun to work with. So that's something that I think is a good example. The other thing that we've done is JUNTOS, Wyson, and everybody underneath that umbrella worked hard to get a school board representative for South Triad, where a lot of the Hispanics live. Unfortunately, we didn't get the person kind of who we needed to represent us, but at least we have that position in the future to have representation on the school board. Some other things that we've done is we worked with the city council because of the policing. There were some reports that there was some unfair stereotyping and judgment on Hispanics with the police, and that continues to happen. So we did have a private public forum that the city council members sponsored, so we could say our piece and hopefully not endanger our lives or people be upset in terms of a public forum. So we probably need to do a little bit more of that. I'm just not sure what that's going to look like in the future. But I think the thing that I think is going to help with the overall benefits is Wyson has been working on a narrative. The other side, and whatever side you're on, does a really good job of their narrative. And we want to have a shared narrative where there has been minority input. Hispanics had contributed to this narrative. And so if we keep saying the same message over and over again, that's going to help our Hispanic community, because it's going to have a message about the people, the people's voice, not what's happening politically, what we want and how we want that to look. So I think those are just examples when I was thinking about that, to give you some kind of food for thought, how it would benefit overall in the Latino Hispanic communities.
Thanks, Carla. And that's a good number. We're trying to do that here. So one day we'll be up there as well. So Antonio, what about you? What are your thoughts?
So when I was thinking about this question of how civic engagement would benefit well-being and representation of Latino folks, I think about the people that shared with me the things that are impacting them. So if you see one side of town getting big, shiny new schools built constantly, but all the schools on your community are overpopulated and in desperate need of being rebuilt, civic engagement, how you change that. If you see people in power from both parties targeting the most vulnerable in our communities, like the houseless, and then pretend to be in support of marginalized communities, this is how you change that. If you have loved ones who are incarcerated and you want them to have just decent living conditions, which they do not have right now, and you want them to have access to healthcare because they're human beings, and this is how you change that, is with civic engagement. And one big thing, like right now, which is a big target for people, is if you have a child who's LGBTQ plus and you see them getting targeted and cornered in by people of power, from Karens on school boards to the lawmakers in sorry, y'all, that one, it gets to you. If you see this happening to your children in a state where we don't have access to healthcare like we should, especially if you're low income, civic engagement is how you fight back against it and make change. And it doesn't feel like it, but that is a benefit to our community, is creating the change that we need and want, you know.
That was, yeah, I agree. There is a lot that we can do, and showing up is one way. What about you, Rachel?
Yeah, increasing civic engagement and representation of the Hispanic Latino communities, it's huge. Outreach and meeting the Hispanic Latino community where they are. It's already been mentioned, building that trust and building resources is everything. I'll just piggyback on the work that both Carla and Antonio are doing. And that's the work in Cheyenne of the South Side, right? And there's a lot of support for growing the South Side of Cheyenne where I live, right? But the South Side, just by even calling it the South Side, right, carries it a distinct connotation. There are so many other areas that need to be grown too in Cheyenne, but we concentrate on the South Side because yes, there needs to be a lot of improvement, but there's dangerous assumptions that come with the labeling something without the historical context or the will to make things different. So there's, as Antonio mentioned, it's more of a food desert, right? Not enough grocery stores, where most of our Title I schools are. So there's more of a poverty concentration. There's people don't want to invest in that area because of that. But what civic engagement means is engaging everybody. So I grew up on the North Side, right? But if there's improvements to the South Side, that means that I'm going to benefit from that. Everybody's going to benefit from those changes. So we need to name it, not just dance around it, but take those actions. Little things like when showing up at the transportation meetings, because there wasn't even a bus transportation stop in front of our alternative high school, right? Those are things that we need to just do and engage. So the lighting that WIC has worked on to get in place, right? That's not only is that going to make the South Side safer, but it's gonna make my community better. So engaging the entire community to look at these systems. Sometimes we just say, oh yeah, things have always been that way. We don't even know, like the covenants that are in place that are so racist and just like doesn't even define it. So we've done a good job of addressing that. How did these come into place and how do we get these addressed, right? When more transportation is put in, increased lighting, everything's safer, businesses will want to come in and invest. And it's not so much that we will even grow that, but people will want to stay. They won't want to leave. So we have to stop living in our bubbles and assuming that people want to stay in their bubbles. Civic engagement means encompassing the entire community, because what's good for changes for the South Side, there are already so many good things happening, also highlighting those, right? And then those are going to be good changes for everybody. So that's why I think that that's important for our community.
100%. I think I wanted to highlight that comment of this is where we live and this is where we are part of this community. So we should also have a say so in how our places are. But yeah, wonderful. Thanks, guys. So the next one is how can increasing civic engagement empower individuals within the Hispanic and Latino communities in Wyoming to have a stronger voice in local decision-making processes?
Didn't we just do that?
Oh, I probably did, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
The next one is, can you provide,
what was I thinking? Okay.
So I think so. Okay, we'll just skip to the next one. Can you provide examples of successful initiatives and programs in other states that have effectively increased civic engagement with Hispanic and Latino communities? Something that you might want to try here. Carla?
Yeah, I mentioned several things that we've tried. Another example that we've learned a lot from is Wyson brought in the New Mexico Narrative Project. And Cheyenne, I hope, gets to that point where New Mexico is. They involve all their people, but it wasn't that way. They had to work together in order to say, hey, like Antonio said, we have a right to be here and we have a say. So maybe that example somebody could look at is a New Mexico Narrative Project, and it's a civic engagement would be a good example. I've learned a lot just being part of Wyson because it's not just JUNTOS and WIC. We have 14 other 501(c)(3)s and several 504(c)(504)s. So just our meetings and our gatherings and our trainings, we've learned a lot. So we don't want to work in a silo in Laramie County. I believe that we need to work together as a community of the state of Wyoming for Hispanics and for marginalized people. Let's help each other. Let's not work against each other.
Correct. Collaboration. Antonio, what are your thoughts?
So I know like people like the Hispanic Federation and LULAC have both run like civic engagement projects, and I'm always down to reach out to people, to allies out of state for resources, for support, help, things that we don't have here in Wyoming. But I tend to not look out of state for some things. I'm like a lot of people in Wyoming is like, don't come and tell me how to do what I'm doing out here, But I'm gonna always kind of stick to what I keep saying is driving change means being in community, and that's how you organize in Wyoming, is by being in community. That's how you drive change. That's how you motivate people to show up, is by being present. So I've been part of campaigns where I saw how we demolish the opposition in counties where we were able to canvass the most. And I know that nothing beats in community work, having real conversations with your neighbors, with your friends up the street about real issues. That's a good way. I like that's how we make some change up here, is doing it like that. It's pretty simple. You just got to have the people to do it.
I love that. I always tell people Wyoming's so different. We're on our own level. So, but yeah. What about you, Rachel?
Yeah, it's so true. And Carla's right and Antonio's right in terms of like we do need to look to other places that have success in organizing, but tailor it to the Wyoming way, because it is unlike no other place. And so even if we look, and Carla mentioned that the narrative work that was based on going out and really surveying actual Wyomingites for their thoughts on what it is like to live in Wyoming and what they want, right? And so then we can use that to just really say, okay, how are we going to tell our stories differently, but also have a common, storyline that people can inspire civic engagement. So in Arizona, I recently was on a podcast about the young Latinx voters. And Latinos in Arizona, come on, they either are or they're close to the majority, right? So in context, Wyoming has just around 10% of the population that identifies as Latino Hispanic. And so we also have the next voting majority of the population, but what is 10%? And so what Arizona did is focus on the young Latino vote. They started looking at their census and mapping, and that's so important in civic engagement, is to kind of know what your base is, right? What are the numbers seeing? And then they'll turn those numbers into qualitative information. Obviously, we are more than just numbers and percentages, but what Arizona did is they looked at the census, they mapped where Latinos were underrepresented, specifically young Latinos, and how the electorate could really change and become dynamic into the future. So they looked at, they call it the undercamp of the census, where nobody was really focusing at the time. And some of these groups came in and mobilized where they were underestimated. And then now you have it 8 years later that when young people get in the game, they change maps, they change votes, they change, they get the electorate that Carla mentioned that we'd like to see more of in office. So these voters not only elected more people representative, but they leverage that potential that's now so important for the future. So I know a lot of groups, and especially in the Latino population, these are we want our young Latinos to stay in Wyoming and they're leaders and become leaders. And how do you engage them when there's so much going on? So I'm interested in the social media digital technology question that we have coming up. I'm always learning
Yeah.
as well. Yeah,
I think
so
that's a great
that's
one.
what Arizona did.
That's amazing. Something that my husband always uses is like, why reinvent the wheel when you can just get a size that fits your needs? And so it's interesting how when we go out of out of Wyoming and learn from other folks, it's always nice to bring something, but yet change it to like Antonio said, like why the cowboy way, like the Wyoming way. So yeah, no, thank you for that. The next question is, what role does civic engagement play in fostering a sense of belonging, identity, and cultural preservation within the Hispanic and Latino communities in Wyoming? Carla, would you like to go?
Like I was saying earlier, I'm not sure we consider ourselves as community organizers, but people that are stepping up in civic engagement are community organizers. And so I think the role that we play in our own communities and cultures is role modeling, or we're part of the community. We're not speaking for the community. You tell us what you're interested in, and then hopefully we share that with people that are in positions that can make some decisions, and then the community can see that something happened. Their voice was heard, their voice was acted upon, and then something changed. And again, that school board slot for South Cheyenne Triad was a good example of that. There was no representation, there was no voice, and we fought for that, got it, and there is a position on that. So we just have to be in the trenches and have to be in the weeds and feel okay with that. Not uncomfortable, go to the culture events. We have so many because we're Hispanic, and so we don't have to be doing civic engagement in your face, but we could be there and registering people, saying you have a right to vote, those type of things, just real subtle, but be at those events and also participate in them. There's a lot of fun going on out there too.
Thanks, Carla. Antonio, I'd love to hear your answer on this one. You always have a great ideas. Let's hear them.
Well, I think we have no problem preserving our identity and culture, staying close to our familia, our culture, our gente. It's what keeps us going when Wyoming makes us feel like the other, straight up. But despite the challenges, that we have in front of us, we're planting roots here. We're raising our families. We're carving out a place for ourselves. And as we carve out a place for ourselves, we need to remember that civic engagement is how we defend our communities that we're building. It's how we defend our businesses. It's how we defend the future of our young ones that we're trying to get to stay here. It's how we fight for the barrio. You know what I mean?
Thank you. And Rachel?
Yeah, I mentioned we're not all the same. There are varied perspectives and voices that we all have, and representation from all cultures. And not all Latinos have ancestry or from Mexico. Surprise, right? We have varied backgrounds, and so civic engagement can foster movements that become the norm. And if we have the tortilleria on the corner, or the church that has Spanish mass, and those all are places that people are gathering, right? And we can go there and we can learn about things that people really care about that drive them. When we were looking for minorities to survey for our narrative work, Carla, gathered up some people, leaders of the church, that she knew where there were a lot of Latino people, and they had that trust. So we got together, we had food, they filled out their surveys. It was like they were doing homework right after school. And because we knew that not everyone could do a survey online. So we provided them as hard copies. And so we met those people where they were, and they were like, oh yeah, okay, why are you asking us these questions? Or like, because your opinion is important and we need to have that. So it's just meeting people where they're at. And like Antonio said, I love that. Not only do we need to be seen just as much Wyoming as anyone else, but our culture, our traditions, they need to be seen just as much Wyoming as the Western cowboy mentality, right? And many times it's the same. My family rode and raised horses and worked on ranches, right? We have been here building Wyoming. We are not just that minority population that's underrepresented. We are Wyoming. And so I think civic engagement can really help foster what is so positive and beautiful about our Latino culture that's living in Wyoming and contributing in a positive way.
I love that. Thank you. I think it's always interesting when you attend events. You're like, oh, this is civic engagement. We're having fun. Like we just hosted a big event here in Rock Springs, and people were, were dancing, and it was all about community. But when the time comes, we get to share, hey, why it's important. Let's continue doing this. So thank you. And yeah, so the next question was, what barriers need to be addressed to effectively engage Hispanic and Latino communities in Wyoming civic process, and what strategies can be employed to overcome potential barriers to civic engagement, such as language barriers, cultural differences within those communities in Wyoming? And Carla.
Through our work, I've seen a lot of barriers, and I'm pretty sure everybody can attest to these, but the dual language is a barrier. In any other country, being bilingual is something that's great. But in America, if you're speaking Spanish, you're not speaking English. So I think that's a barrier that people see as a negative, and I see it as a positive, but it's a challenge. The other thing too is I talk with my friends that, quote, have made it, my Hispanic friends, and I tell them, we have to pay it forward. I mean, if we have to donate to somebody that's campaigning, that's Latino or Hispanic, let's do that. If we need to fight an unjust law that happened with the police department, we have the finances to do that. And then, in the end, hopefully that'll be reimbursed, and that's happened before. But if we don't ask other people to pay it forward, is what I mean, any way you can. It could be financially, it could be your stewardship, it could be volunteering, it could be canvas work. Just pay it forward somehow. And then people say, well, I don't have time. So that's a challenge, and that's a barrier, because that's a true thing. Working class individuals are tired, and they go home, and they just don't want to do anything else. But like Antonio said, if we can bring it back to how is this affecting my family? How is this going to help my family? Then I think we can send that message that, yeah, we need you to be involved. Hispanics, I think in Wyoming, are sometimes seen as illegals. And so that stereotype is a challenge and barrier. And so, again, I think it should be a benefit to have our ancestry, and we bring diversity and stuff. So a lot of these things that seem like a challenge, I think, are strengths, but they're seen as a challenge in Wyoming. The lack of transportation to and from places to vote, to register is also a challenge or issue in our community. It's hard to get around. Like Rachel said, the transportation is not systematic or a way we can do that. Voter ID laws are unfair. And so that's something that's a challenge. The other thing that I was thinking that, and I always say this, is Hispanic initiatives, civic engagement. We need white allies. We need people that are supporting our same initiatives, want everyone to succeed. And that's kind of what WIC is. It's not just a Hispanic organization. It's an organization with all minorities, Democrat, Republican, and one independent, and all faiths. So that's kind of why that's my philosophy, is that it can't just be Hispanics fighting for Hispanic issues. It needs to be the community that's going to benefit from the diversity, fighting for diversity issues. So that's where I think that's at.
Thank you. Antonio?
I think a big barrier is trust. So this is our defense. This is our protection. If someone wants to engage with Latino communities, they need to build trust, and you need to do it for the right reasons. So if the first time you're trying to go into a Latino community is when you're running for election, don't waste your time. Don't waste ours. You can't go into a community with selfish motives and expect everyone to buy into that. I've had a lot of people who were running for office tell me they want to be my friend and they care about immigrants, but as soon as election season is over, they're gone. I never hear from them again. And this has been Democrat and Republicans who have both done this to me. So if you want to truly engage with Latino communities, be present more than just when it serves you. And like Carla said, we need allies, but I will say we don't need no saviors. That's for sure.
Thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, I think another thing with this is we as Latinos, we've got to get out of our own way first and foremost too. So something that that we talked about, and Rosa, you were part of this conversation in the beginning, is like, what are other Latino populations in the state, right? And what are others doing? Because we can learn from that. And then we realize that we're really sometimes truly in isolation. So something that Hope has tried to reach out and do, and we're looking at doing this. Carla and Antonio were both part of it, is just to build that Latino collaborative, right? So we are helping each other. A big obstacle for Civic, a big barrier is that internal. So we're externally focused, right, on engaging populations, but also that internal work. WIC, you know, is just all volunteer driven. They don't have staff. Same thing with JUNTOS, right? Well, you guys now have a staff, but Hope, we're all volunteer. We run into capacity issues all the time. Like there's only like 4 of us doing all the things, and so that can be hard. So not only are we focused on building trust with the community and the newer generation of Latinos that are coming into Wyoming that really want to be here and live here and raise their families here and contribute. You know, there's this idea that, oh, in Wyoming, if you're not born here, you're not Wyoming enough. Come on. Like, and me, I'm like 4th, 5th generation. My parents grew up speaking Spanish. We did not speak Spanish in the home. And so then it's like that Selena movie, right? I'm not Mexican enough when I go to Mexico. I'm not American enough when I come to America. Like, we're just also trying to figure it out. So that's a big barrier and obstacle that we're, even as organizations, trying to figure out how to bring everybody together in their different levels of where they're at. So I think we need to just understand, like Antonio said, that we all started somewhere. Unless you were indigenous to this continent, you came from somewhere. So the language that I grew up with, in the history that I learned at the kitchen table by my parents, was different than maybe what I was learning in school. And so I think that's it's important just to, those obstacles, they're there already for if you're just already normal and like, you know, you've been here a minute and you know the process and you know where the county clerk's office is or whatever. Can you imagine what that process looks like to somebody who's newer, right? Who maybe doesn't know or have anybody to take them along. So with civic engagement, we really need to just bring people along, and because the more people that vote, it's going to be more reflective of the communities that we want to see. So lots of barriers.
I agree. I think, thank you. I think language is a barrier. Even in the Spanish language, like there's so many things that I personally, like I grew up in a Spanish speaking home. My grandmother on my mom's side only spoke Spanish. And so I'm from South Texas, so it's Tex-Mex, Spanglish. And so there's things that when I'm speaking to people in my community and I get stuck in a word, they sometimes are like, oh, you don't speak correct Spanish. And I'm like, I'm having a conversation up until now. You know, it's sometimes it is a struggle, but
let's get out of our own way. Come on.
Yeah, I don't think that should also be like a barrier why we shouldn't go talk to our neighbors or our family or our friends to go get out and vote. It's always interesting when, like you said, we put our own barriers and it shouldn't be a barrier, but thank you. And let me see. We had a question. Somebody sent in a comment. It says, I really resonate with what you all have said. As a white person, what actionable steps can we do to support your work? I want to know what it is to do after this call. Thank you. Who would like to take that on then? Carla?
I'll jump on that one.
Okay, Antonio.
Take leadership from take leadership from BIPOC people. If you wanna support those communities and the organizing they're doing, you take leadership from them. You don't go into nobody's community telling them how to do things or that you have the answers to save their neighborhood, because nobody does. Show solidarity, be an ally.
Thank you. Anyone
Um,
else would like to?
I'm thinking, like I said, white allies are, I don't believe the ones that are engaged with us have a savior complex. I truly believe because they come from just faith backgrounds, they come from their own religious backgrounds, that you're my neighbor. And so that's how I take that relationship with an individual that's not the same culture that I am. Thank you for helping us. What is it that you can do? And they're usually saying, what can I do? And me being elementary retired principal, I'll say, I've got lots of things for you to do. What are you good at? And so those type of things is what you could offer as a Caucasian individual. If we have an event, I myself and a friend, a Caucasian friend, we've go to the Black church just because we want to know more about their culture too. And I don't by any means think that I'm an expert in African American. And so I think we just got to get out of our comfort zone and go into different cultures. And so as a white ally, what I would do is maybe with a Hispanic friend or an African American friend, just say, they had that fiesta that you had in Rock Springs. I really would like to go with that. I feel that maybe I shouldn't be there. It should only be Hispanics. And that's not what our festivals are about. It's about community, and white individuals, Black individuals, Hispanic individuals are the community. So I would just say, what can I do to help with your group? What can I do to help with civic engagement? No matter what community you're at, there are minority groups. There's NAACP, there's something like HOPE, there's something like JUNTOS, there's something like WIC in your community. So I would just kind of see who's in that group, say, hey, I'd like to learn more about it. Can I go to your next meeting? Can you be there with me? That type of stuff. So I encourage all the diversity. I always have. We come from a military background, and I think that's where my diversity, all inclusive, is where I come from. So those are just some suggestions.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, it's just simply sometimes just asking how you might be able to help. I think it's important in doing civic engagement activities that there's different levels of involvement for people to be a part of. And then we have to turn it around from being so crisis oriented to, action oriented, right? And proactive, because a lot of times people show up when stuff hits the fan, but we need you also not during that time. Legislation, we know when the legislature is going to meet every year, but there's 11 other months that we need support, right, with issues that are taking place in committees. And so I think it's just really simply like, if you do have time to get involved, then just, there's so many organizations that'll have you and just, learning about them, maybe reaching out for coffee. Also, if you have connections, right? Like, we have a lot of connections too, but that peer-to-peer relationship building is something that I know a lot of us are concentrating on, and really building those leaders within our organization. So if you have connections, I mean, not only does it take time and energy, but it also takes funding to run these organizations. So some of us are really hesitant to state that and name that, but I mean, that's key. So those are little things. What you say it, if you have a couple hours a week to give, you just don't even have that much time. You have more time, and just really stepping in to ask how you might be of a support. Yeah, that's important to me. Thank you for that question.
So we have a few that actually came up. So let me see. Somebody is asking, do you see value in this type of cross-cultural understanding via like music, food, or arts?
Food. I think it's huge. I think also for other groups that I've been in. I mean, you think about, we just had the Greek Fest and how many thousands of people turn out for that, and that's an opportunity to always learn. And so I think food is absolutely sharing culture, knowing that our Hispanic festival this year, Rosa, I know you guys did your inaugural one in Rock Springs, but what I really like with the Hispanic Festival Committee is that they have not just encompassed Mexico's Independence Day, which is September 16th, and that was really the precipice for all this, but knowing that there were a lot of other Latino countries that were also celebrating their own independence, right? And so that's, I think, important to just really, not only are you bringing people together around food or you're dancing or your other cultural activities, but you're also providing that the education about how these things came to be. There's a difference between Cinco de Mayo and and Independence Day, and so I'm always happy. I'm also learning, always constantly learning about things through those activities when I attend about other people, and so I think that's key. Yeah, anytime there's food, you can call me.
I agree. Food gets us there. Antonio, do you have anything?
Yeah, I want to just like piggyback off that. Yeah, like show up, like Carla said, show up to the Hispanic Festival, show up to the events you have in Rock Springs, try out the food. Don't be scared to go into that tienda and try out some of that salsa, no pica, for real. But just like don't be afraid to dive in, and supporting Latino communities isn't just about like voting. It's about supporting those businesses that are trying to carve out their space here in Wyoming. You know what I mean? Who are wanting to raise their families and get their life going here. You know what I mean? That's how you can support us too.
I'd like to address the arts question. WIC was fortunate to get a grant that did our catwalk because it was being graffitied all the time. And so we put a portrait of minorities' contribution to the railroad on the catwalk cement part. And that was a really good educational thing. There are so many, we're finding grants out there for art. And so the other thing we did is we had a young Hispanic Latina girl that went to my school, was an artist that did a cowboy boot. If you're in Cheyenne, you know cowboy boots. They're all over the place. But ours represented the iconic community of South Cheyenne, the places that old folks went to and talked about. We didn't have to go over to the Vidoc at that time. That South Side was a community drugstore, grocery store, library, those type of things. So on that boot is the iconic back in the day locations. And also we've done some art thing with Sidewalk. The city of Cheyenne has done some art things, and so some Hispanic artists have been out there. There's a lot of murals in town that reflect some Hispanic heritage. I know Antonio's is it cousin that does the tattooing. There was some event for that also. So the cross culture thing I wanted to say too is before, when we had our Facebook page and our website, it would all be just what WIC did. And so what we're trying to do now is share our events on everybody else's Facebook page. So if there's an NAACP event, it'll be posted not only on ours, but on another Facebook page. If Antonio's community cleanup is happening, that's on our Facebook, or he's done some things for us in regards to no hate in our town. So the cross-culture things could be publicized there. We also have the benefit of the base, and so we're working really with some base personnel to get them kind of involved. And that's just diversity already with the base. They just come that way. They feel that, and they want to have a connection with the community. So I think the cross-cultural stuff is really a good way. The depot, we have the music downtown. They've brought in some really good bands that are Latin also. And so I think that's a way to get people into having a event festival, and then maybe having a civic engagement purpose somewhere in that event would be a fantastic idea.
Thank you. I do love that we're all having our little event throughout the state of Wyoming. Definitely brings our cultural life and everything. So we're almost at time, but there is one question still from the audience. So we have one question that if you guys can take like a minute or less to answer this, that would be great. The question was, what do you all need to build power in your communities? Like how do they level up as allies? Antonio, would you like to take this question?
Sure. We have a big shortage of organizers in Wyoming, especially organizers of color, people who can relate to people in the community, people who come from like working class backgrounds, who understand that struggle, you know, knows what it's like to have to go to knees when you don't got groceries, or knows what it's like to have to apply for food stamps, or who's been through that, you know. We need help funding people like that. We need to be able to have organizers who can go door to door, who can go canvas, who can go talk to people and really get this work going. Because there's a few of us here, and like somebody said at the beginning, we all wear multiple hats, and we wear too many damn hats, to be straight up. So we need backup. We need volunteers to help us when it's time to go out and work in community. We need people who can help fund those organizers that needs to do that work here. So that's, for me, we need more organizers, and we need FEDIA for those organizers.
Thank you.
For me, just a minute, I think there's 3 forms of power. There's people power, and that's what we need. That's what Antonio is saying in terms of, and don't be afraid to go to one of our events to introduce yourself, to say, hey, I'd like to help out. So this is the people power. Just come and attend a meeting or something like that. The other powers are not ones that you really want to get into, but we also need some money. So money's a power. And so like Antonio said, these positions need to be funded in order to get people to even volunteer work on sliding scale or consultant work. And then the other power is violence. And that one scares me a lot, but I think that's what's happening a lot here in Wyoming and throughout our country. And so we have to combat violence with, I don't know if it's not kindness anymore, violence with facts and standing up for what you believe. They can get a group of people, we can get a group of people. That power of people is going to be what civic engagement and what you can do to help. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add really quickly, just being invited into spaces. So if you have a space that you can co-collaborate on something, just extending that invitation will help build power.
Perfect. I agree. Thank you. So Rachel, do you want to answer this question? The last one we have for the night. How can technology and social media be leveraged to connect with and mobilize Hispanic and Latino residents for civic activities?
Woo! We could do a whole just session on this, right? But yeah, technology and media absolutely needs to be leveraged to connect and mobilize. It's a benefit, but as you guys know, it can be used wrongly. It can be an obstacle. Not everyone has access to technology, but we're meeting right now by using technology. That when, if we didn't have that. So I always say, as we see the changing of the guards of the boomer generation, and we're trying to activate the younger generation, we have the digital ancestors, the digital immigrants, that's me, and then the digital born, right? And we know that technology and social media is not going away anytime soon. So we've got to evolve with it. We saw how critical it was to our survival of the first year. And you guys, have you been paying attention to Taylor Swift and Selena Gomez? I mean, Taylor Swift says, go out and check your voter registration, and the site explodes. She starts dating the quarterback of the Chiefs, and their like site is shutting down. So we need to harness the power and also use it to provide education, unbiased, right, and counter misinformation, and just really use it as a tool that's empowering. So yeah, I think we're never going to get away from it. So we got to use it, bring people along.
Thank you. Carla or Antonio, do you have any thoughts before we wrap up?
I'll be really quick with it. Latinos are just as online as everyone else. Honestly doesn't matter what platform you use to reach out to us, as long as you're talking about issues that impact our community, and then you're going to us rather than expecting us to come to you.
Perfect. All right, Carla, do you have any final thoughts on this question?
No, I was hoping to listen to Rachel's thoughts. I just
Yeah,
think
Rachel was excited.
I was just thinking that we had for social media just to attend events and then find out how it was announced and look at different ways to see how things are announced through Facebook, through the web, through the newspaper. That's media also too. So continue to look at those different events.
Yeah, I agree. Social media brings us together. My mom just found Facebook, and so she's been FaceTiming with my uncles and aunts in Mexico, and it's been great. So it brings families together, even if they're not nearby. So it has been a really good conversation. Obviously, we have so much work. We have so much more to say. I hope that it doesn't stop here. I hope we continue to have these conversations. So as allies, we would love if you guys would invite us to chat with you guys, especially since some of you, we didn't get to your questions. So forgive me for that. But again, thank you to everybody, to the panelists, to everybody attending. Thank you to the ESBC Board of Directors who came out, and also our staff. So with that being said, let me say, Equality State Policy Center is a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organization, and we rely on charitable donations and to fund our work. So donations can be made at equalitystate.org. And again, thank you all for a great conversation. Have a good night.